Hi folks, FPL General here, recording a new episode of my 59th Minute FPL Podcast, recording on Tuesday, August 6th. So it's finally here. We're only 3 days away from kickoff. I can't believe it's rolled around so quickly. That was a very fast summer. Wanted to get a podcast out this week before things do kick off. It's an extremely busy week for me. I dread this week every season, I already can't wait for the deadline to arrive. But wanted to get a pod out, so going to go through some housekeeping first. Just talk about what my plans are for the season. A couple of new things to talk about as well. Then I put out a tweet yesterday for questions ahead of Gameweek 1, so I'm going to run through probably 5 or 6 of those. They cover some of the main talking points for building a Gameweek 1 team. And then I'm going to finish the podcast just by going through 5 of the big questions I'm asking myself this week. So I've noted down the biggest dilemmas I have basically when I'm trying to finalise my Game Week 1 team. So all in, probably 40-45 minutes I would imagine for this one. So housekeeping first of all, I just want to welcome any new listeners as well. I usually get a big spike of new followers in July and August. So if you're listening for the first time, welcome. When the season starts, I will be releasing a podcast every Tuesday, apart from the international break. So whenever there's an international break, I won't do one in the first week of the international break. I'll do one in the second one. So every Tuesday by 5 p.m. UK time, you should have a new 59th minute episode, which will look back on the previous game week and look ahead to the upcoming one as well. So usually they're around 30 to 40 minutes maximum, so I don't tend to go on too long. Like to keep it short, to the point, and nice and easy for you to listen to. Most of you will know as well, I have a new website, fplgeneral.com. So if you haven't done so yet, check that out. It's a work in progress. We will be adding lots of new content and features throughout the season. Some really good content on there now from season ticket holders. So I've got a season ticket holder from every Premier League team, and they're going to be doing FPL match reports after each game. So each week there should be 10 match reports on the website, fplgeneral.com. So if you're interested in a Leicester player, for example, you can jump on and read the match report from the most recent Leicester game from someone who was sitting in the stadium watching the game. So really excited about those. Something else I want to flag up as well about the website. There's a couple of old podcasts there of mine which I would highly recommend you listen to before the season starts. 2 in particular. One of them is 11 tips for FPL success. It's only about a half an hour long. And the other one is the podcast that I did at the end of last season. It's called Lessons Learned. I think it's called Season Review / Lessons Learned. So that's a really good one because I had an awful season last season, and there was a lot to be taken and learned from that. So I think if there was one podcast you should listen to before Friday, it's that one of mine, Lessons Learned, and just learn from my mistakes last season. What else do I need to mention before I get into this? I also do another podcast every week called Fantasy Weekly with James, and there's actually 3 of them coming out this week. So there's going to be one on Wednesday, one on Thursday, and another one on Friday. So be sure to check out Fantasy Weekly podcast as well. Fantasy Weekly is part of the Fantasy Bet Network, and Fantasy Bet have a very exciting daily fantasy competition starting on Friday called Fantasy Divisions. So basically what it is, first 2 weeks are a qualifying round, and then depending on how you get on the first 2 weeks, you're put into certain divisions. Every 4 weeks then, you've got promotion and relegation. So £10,000 up for grabs in that one, and it's just $5.50 to enter a team in that one. So as always, it's 18 plus and be gamble aware. Any questions you have about Fantasy Bet as well, just send me a message and I'll be happy to explain it more to you. Last season was my first season last season was my first year going full time into working in fantasy. So the main source of my income comes from my Patreon page, and I've updated it for the new season. It's going to be bigger and better than it was last year. So if you want to find out more about that, it's patreon.com/FPL General. Just a quick idea of what you get for $3 a month there. You get probably going to be about 5 or 6 podcasts a week on Patreon. I'm going to, every Premier League game I watch this season, I'm going to do an eye test versus stats podcast for it. So short podcast, only about 10 to 15 minutes long for each game that is televised in the UK. So the plan is probably to do maybe one of those each week that will be free to everyone to listen to, but the majority of them will be for the Patreon subscribers there. Also on Patreon, every Thursday you get an extra podcast which also comes out as a video. Usually by a Thursday I'm more clued into what I'm going to do with my team, so you get to find out what I'm doing. I send an email to patrons every Friday as well with a press conference roundup, so you don't have to go looking for all the news. You get it all in one place, sent directly to your emails. And you get to see my team and my transfers every week as well before the deadline. So all of that for $3 a month. So if you're interested, you'll find the links on my Twitter page for that. One last piece of housekeeping before I get stuck into the questions. Last season I did a fundraiser mini league for the Cam Zone to raise money and more so really to raise awareness of the Cam Zone and what they do. They're doing great work for men's mental health. So I've set up the league again this season. So all you need to do really is just Google FPL Cam Mini League, and that should bring you to the Just Given page. And when you make a donation, no matter how big or small it is, you'll see the mini league code then on the Just Given page. We raised about £2,600 last season, and we didn't start until around Gameweek 10. So this season I'm hoping to build on that figure and get it to £5,000. But more importantly, get the Cam Zone name out there and get more men talking. That's the main reason for that. So the prize for that mini league this season, I'm going to give the winner a Premier League jersey of their choice. So whoever wins that mini league at the end of the season, I'll be asking them what Premier League shirt do they want for the 2020-2021 season, and I'll send it to them. So nice prize there for anyone who wants to donate to the charity. Right, that is enough housekeeping. As I said, I've got about 5 or 6 questions here, and then I'll talk about my own headaches then as well. So the first question came in from Navishka. Navishka's asking about the Man United defence. Is the United defence reliable now with Wan-Bissaka and Harry Maguire there? So two good signings for United. Wan-Bissaka in particular is an excellent signing. I feel I'm not a huge fan of Harry Maguire, but he is better than what is already there. So I do expect more clean sheets from United this season. But for me, in FPL terms, I'm happy enough just to wait and see, and that kind of goes for United in general. I'm not really interested in any United players for game week 1, mainly because of the fixtures. We've got Chelsea first and then we've got Wolves, so it's a pretty tough start to the season. So I'm happy just to wait and see, how do we look defensively, how do the likes of Martial, Rashford, these players look, Pogba as well, and then maybe make a call on them from game week 3 onwards. So for me, I think the United defence should be more reliable. Will it be is another question. So for me, it's just a wait and see on United. Next question is from Dieter. Dieter asks, he's talking about bench fodder players here. So he's asking who are the best 4 million defenders and who are the best 4.5 million midfielders and forwards. So starting with defenders, first of all, the player I've got in my team, and I'm seeing him in a lot of teams as well, is Sheffield United's Lundstrom. So I think he's played every minute in pre-season. If not, it's been close to every minute. So that's why he's popping up in a lot of teams. 4 million, you just sit him on your bench, and you sit him third on your bench. You never really want to use him. So he looks good to start the season. Now I know a lot of Sheffield United fans they don't think he'll keep his place long term, but if he starts the first couple of games, great, and he should hold his value as well. So he's the one in my team. There's not many other options really at the moment, unless things open up with a few late transfers before Thursday night's transfer deadline. That's the Premier League transfer deadline, not the FPL deadline. Not to panic people there saying there's a Thursday deadline. So things like Burnley, there's a lot of talk that Tarkowski could possibly move to Leicester. If that happened, that might open up Ben Gibson as a 4 million defender for us. At Bournemouth, I think there's some injuries there at left back now. I think the new guy Kelly is injured, so that could see Rico, who's 4 million, play a couple of games. But again, these 4 million defenders, you usually get what you pay for. Wan-Bissaka and Bennett were were godsends last season. I don't think we're going to have anything like that this year, unless possibly Gibson at Burnley becomes an option. So for me, it's Lundstram. I think that's the one I'll go for. Not one to overthink there, really. Moving to bench fodder midfielders then, 4.5 million. I think Den Donker is the obvious one here. Plays for a good side. Looks like he'll play most weeks. And, he gets forward as well. He's not one of these, midfielders who just sits and protects the back four. Towards the end of last season, he was getting forward, got himself a couple of goals. So I think Den Donker is a very good option as a sub. I'm seeing him pop up in a lot of starting 11s. I don't like that, but I do like him as a first sub or a second sub. So Den Donker is on my bench. The only other one I've got noted down here is Hayden at Newcastle. Had a pretty productive season last year. I think he was 4.5 last season as well. So again, will he play? We're not 100% sure, but if he's still at Newcastle, I think he will be an option for the bench as well. But for me, Den Donker, easy pick. Stick him in, forget about it. Forwards then, 4.5 million forwards, so there's lots of love for Mason Greenwood at United, 4.5. He's got decent minutes in pre-season. I think he started in Gameweek 38 last season as well, so he's very highly rated. The worry for me with him is I think he's up at around 14-15% ownership, which is huge for a 4.5 million striker. If we start the season, if Greenwood does nothing, or if he just starts getting 5 or 10 minutes from the bench and he's not scoring goals, everyone's going to sell him, and he's very quickly going to become 4.4, possibly even 4.3 million, and that's a bit of a nightmare. When it comes to playing your wild card, you've lost 0.2 or 0.3 unnecessarily there, really. So that's why I think I'm probably going to avoid Greenwood for that reason. I think I've got Wickham in there instead, Crystal Palace striker Wickham, just again to warm the bench. So Den Donker will be my first sub. Probably Wickham second, or probably Lundstram second, and then Wickham third. I just feel, with your bench players, you want them to hold their value. And I think Wickham has a better chance of doing that. And Wickham should get some minutes off the bench as well. And that's all you can really ask for from a 4.5 million striker. But let's see, Greenwood could, if Solskjaer gives him a start, game week 1, game week 2, gets a couple of goals, then great. You've got a great 4.5 million asset on your bench as well. But for me, I think I'm just going to avoid and see how he does. Good question there, Dieter. Thanks for that one. The next questions come in are about Leicester. So 2 similar questions here. First one was from Rodrigo. Should we start the season with Leicester players despite their fixtures? And a similar question as well from FPL Crypto. Are we all prematurely jumping on Leicester? So lots of love for Leicester assets under Rodgers. There's lots of good options. Vardy, Tielemans, Maddison, Perez. The defenders are decent options as well, but the big caveat is the fixtures. I'm just looking at them in front of me here. The first 8 for Leicester are Wolves, Chelsea. Then they've got Sheffield United and Bournemouth, which is okay. But then they've got United, Spurs, Newcastle and Liverpool. So when you look at it as a first 8 set of fixtures, it's pretty nasty. Yes, there's just 2 or 3 nice fixtures in there, but the majority of them are pretty nasty. And that's making me think twice about including Leicester assets in my team. So I think Vardy's the best Leicester option because we know what he's like. The fixtures don't really matter for Vardy. He's got a great record against the bigger sides. He's on penalties and he's going to play every week. So I think he's a very good option. It's just an awkward price point for Vardy. And he's not in my side at the moment because of that price, really. That's probably the only reason he's not in my team is his price. He just doesn't fit into my current structure. The only Leicester player in my latest draft is Perez. Now, I've been tweeting, during the summer about Perez, how I'm not overly keen on him as an FPL asset. I'm trying to get people to sell him to me. The reason he keeps finding his way into my team is his price. I just don't like anyone else at 6.5 million or less when it comes to midfielders. So it's his price that's getting him into my side. And he is a proven FPL player. I think he got 12 goals in the last 2 12 goals in each of the last 2 seasons, playing for a very defensive team at Newcastle. So the hope would be, obviously, he comes in, Rodgers loves it, he becomes a favourite of Rodgers, and he hits the ground running, and he plays close to Vardy up front, and he bangs in, 15 plus goals. So that is the hope. And I definitely think there is potential there for him to do that in that team. And again, it's just his price. I think there's a very good chance he will just stay in my Game Week 1 draft now, because again, as I say, I don't really like any of the others in his price bracket. Maddison, Tielemans, great options as well, but I just think the 0.5 saving on Perez, I just like that. I think the fact that they've lost Maguire, that puts me off their defence, completely. We don't really know who's going to be playing at centre defence for Leicester. So that puts me off the likes of Pereira and Chilwell. Pereira and Chilwell are both great attacking fullbacks. They should get, plenty of assists, and maybe a few goals as well. But clean sheet wise, I'm just not overly confident in Leicester, again, especially with those fixtures as well. So that's some of my thoughts on Leicester. I probably wouldn't be getting two Leicester assets for the start of the season. I think one is fine, and it just really comes down to what your preference is out of those attackers. There's lots of good options there. Next question was from Lewis, a question about goalkeepers. So Lewis is asking, should we set and forget a premium goalkeeper or alternate between two cheaper goalkeepers, so maybe two 4.5 options? So that's obviously two popular strategies are, get a premium, get someone like Ederson or Alisson and just forget about it. Or you can get another popular strategy in FPL is always to get two 4.5 goalkeepers. So an example there would be someone like Pope and Heaton, and just, play the guy who's got the easiest fixture every week. The third option I'll add in there as well is just getting a 4.5 million set and forget, because that's probably what I'm going to do, because I've never had much luck doing the 4.5 million rotation. It's very frustrating. Quite often what happens is you'll play the keeper who has the easier fixture, but it's the other goalkeeper sitting on your bench who racks up the save points against maybe a top 6 team and gets bonus points as well. So I always try and take the frustration out of FPL, and that's one way I like to do it. I rather just get a goalkeeper and play them every week rather than having to look at big points on my bench from a goalkeeper. So it also saves 0.5, and every draft I put together, I'm always saying I wish I had another 0.5, and going with a 4.5 million goalkeeper and a 4 million backup, so spending 8.5 on your goalkeepers rather than 9, that gives you that extra 0.5 that can be the difference elsewhere in your team. So that's what I'm going for. I've got Pope in goal at the minute, probably because he was so good for me a couple of seasons ago. I got right on him when Heaton got injured, and he played a big part in me getting the top 500 finish that season himself, and I had Ben Mee as well, I think, and they racked up the clean sheets and the bonus points. So I'm on Pope at the minute. I'm not 100% set on him because of the early fixtures for Burnley. Just looking at them here, it's Southampton, Arsenal, Wolves, Liverpool. So for a first 4, that is not ideal for Burnley defence. So part of me is thinking of maybe going a different direction with the goalkeeper and maybe getting Pope on the wild card whenever I play it. But I think, if I had to lock my team in now this evening, I think Pope would be in it. So that really, I need to take another look at goalkeepers. It's probably something I've ignored the last couple of days, and before Friday I will be taking another look. But pretty sure I'll be going for a 4.5 million and a 4 million backup, just spending the minimum amount on that position. Last question I'll tackle before I talk about some of my own questions is from Abhishek. So Abhishek asks, how important is it to have a playing bench for the start of the season? So my team and most teams I'm seeing on social media and Reddit and things like that, and on Slack are spending the minimum on the bench. So you're talking about a 4 million goalkeeper, and then depending on formation, you've got maybe a 4 million defender and then two 4.5s as well. So Dendoncker looks good because you can have him as first sub, and he should get 90 minutes most weeks, so he's ideal as a first sub as long as Wolves don't sign anyone in his position, which could happen before Friday. So I think for the start of the season the bench is not as important, but the key is to have the players in your starting 11 need to be nailed on players. So you don't want to be taking punts in your starting 11, getting 2 or 3 guys, maybe Chelsea players that we're not sure if they're going to play. I'm trying to think of a few other examples, but you don't want to have punts in your starting 11 and then have a dirt cheap bench who don't play. So I think that's the key. If you're going for a complete budget bench. Make sure that the 11 players in your team, make sure you're confident that they're all going to start game week 1. So I think that's the main message there. So for me, I'm happy enough to go, completely budget defence, and then maybe when it comes to wildcard, maybe I'll invest maybe an extra 0.5 or an extra million in the bench at the end. But I think it's completely fine for the start to go with a weak bench. Maybe if you have Dendonker, Lundstrom, these kind of guys. But the key is the starting 11. Make sure your starting 11 is a group of 11 players who you can be very confident that will start game week 1. Moving on now to my own big questions that I need to answer myself this week before the deadline. So I've noted down 5 here. So the biggest one for me is De Bruyne. So I've just written down here, do I want Kevin De Bruyne alongside Sterling? So Sterling is locked in my team alongside Salah. I think Salah and Sterling are just easy picks. They take the stress out of the captaincy as well for the first chunk of the season. The big question I have is, do I want De Bruyne in there as well? Now the problem with if I want to add De Bruyne, I need to make downgrades elsewhere. So at the moment, De Bruyne is not in my draft, but he could be by Friday. As I say, to get him in, it means maybe downgrading in defence or even downgrading a striker as well. So that's kind of putting me off at the minute. But again, it's just his price, 9.5 million for Kevin De Bruyne. It feels it's too tempting to pass up. It feels like he did look good in the Community Shield as well. Obviously, the big question with him is fitness. I got burned, last season. Brought him in, captained him, and he went off injured in the first half. So that's in the back of my mind as well. I know it's terrible to say, but part of me would love to avoid De Bruyne, and then he does get injured in the first game week. But I really shouldn't be saying I shouldn't be wishing injuries on players. So that is a big one for me. I'll be mulling over De Bruyne for the next couple of days. Second big question I've got for my team is which 2 Liverpool defenders to get. So I want to get 2 Liverpool defenders, but I don't know which 2 I want to go for. So I think for most of the summer I've had Alexander-Arnold and Van Dijk in there. I think my latest one has Trent and Robertson, so the two fullbacks rather than Van Dijk. I think a lot of people are probably struggling with this if you are going with two Liverpool defenders. Robertson was amazing last season. I had Robertson probably 36 or 37 game weeks last season. He's just so reliable. He's got no competition. He plays every game. Bonus points magnet. 12 assists. And he surely will score a couple of goals this season as well. But there's arguments to be made for all these. Van Dijk, I think he got 4 goals, 4 assists last season, and he's cheaper. So that's the big draw with Van Dijk. He frees up that very valuable 0.5 million that can be used elsewhere. And then Trent, I feel like Trent is the best FPL option, but then he's got more threat of a rotation than the other 2 have. So we've seen it in the Community Shield. Matip came on, Trent went off, and Gomez went to right back. So that is always a worry with Alexander-Arnold. But I just feel that the points potential when he does play is probably worth that little risk. Even if he does miss the odd game, he could score. He can easily score 15 points any given game week. Being on corners, taking free kicks and stuff like that as well. He's just so important to the way Liverpool attack. So again, I think I'm going to be pulling my hair out over that one for the next couple of days. Which two Liverpool defenders to go for? What I will say is, I don't think any choice you make is a wrong choice. I think you just got to pick 2 and just be happy with it. And whatever happens, then you can't really. You can't beat yourself up if you say if you avoid Trent and then he scores 15 points game week 1, you can't beat yourself up because it wasn't the wrong decision to go for Van Dijk and Robertson, because they're both excellent options as well. So I think that's what I'll do. I probably won't tear my hair out too much. Just pick 2 of them and just be done with it. Question 3 I need to answer this week is, I've mentioned already, do I want Perez? Even though I don't feel as much love for him as others do. Again, like I mentioned, it's his price point. He just fits in nicely to my current structure. And I do think he will have a good season at Leicester. Question 4 I have is, do I go without Man City defence? So Laporte has been in my team, most of the summer. He missed the Community Shield. He's an injured out now for the weekend, so all eyes will be on Guardiola's press conference to see what is going on there. I've gone off the idea of Zinchenko because to me it just feels like a transfer waiting to happen when Mendy comes back. The other centre-back, who's going to play alongside Laporte, we don't know. Could be Stones, could be Otamendi, could even be Fernandinho. So I'm just steering clear of that as well. And big talk today that this Cancelo guy is going to come in, which probably puts Walker under threat. He could even play left-back as well. So Ederson is the safest route into the City defence, but I'm going for a cheap goalkeeper. So I may end up starting the season without a City defender. If I don't get De Bruyne, that means I've only got one City, which is Sterling, which it just sounds wrong. I kept saying last season, towards the end of last season, I didn't have enough Liverpool and City players, two best teams in the league, and here I am talking about going into the season with just one City player. So I think most likely I'll go into the season with two City players. Now, whether it's Sterling and De Bruyne or Sterling and Laporte, I need to wait and see what happens in the press conference for that one. But again, I don't think it's crazy to go into the season without City defenders as well. Looking at the fixtures, they've got West Ham, Spurs, Bournemouth in the first three. So I can see those teams getting goals as well. So I don't, I think if you are thinking about going into the season without City defenders, I think there's, you can justify that decision. So yeah, for me, it'll be all eyes on Pep and what he has to say about Laporte at the weekend. Or sorry, on Friday's press conference. Another big headache I have is strikers. Strikers is really, really annoying me. I can't seem to settle on a strike force that I like. So my current structure is two cheap strikers, so two 6.5 million strikers, no premiums. Of course that could change before Friday, but I don't think it will. I think I am going to invest, more of my money in defence and midfield this season and just go with cheaper strikers to begin with at least. So I think I've got King at the minute and Jota, and I'm not overly happy about either of them really. I'd rather have Wilson, despite what he did to me last season. I just think he's a far better option than King. He's a better striker and I expect him to score more goals. So I'd rather have him, but it's hard to fit him in when he's 1.5 million more expensive, which is why King is there. And I'm sure a lot of people are having the same thing. They probably put Wilson into their draft and then they find they need to free up funds, and an obvious way to do so is to go Wilson to King. So Wilson is the one I'd like to have from the Bournemouth attack, but I may just have to settle for King for budget reasons and just watch Wilson score a hat-trick game week 1 then, of course. Jota as well. I'm not, I really like Jota as an FPL option. He was excellent towards the end of last season. I think he'll have a big season, but it's, the early season schedule is a bit hectic for Wolves with Europa League. I don't like the fact they've brought in another striker as well. Extra competition there for Jimenez and Jota. So, as I say, I've got two cheap strikers at the minute, and I just can't settle on a strike force that I'm happy with. There's lots of other options there as well. The likes of Deulofeu, some of the new strikers, and obviously I could try and get up to Wilson or Vardy as well, but that is probably the thing I'm finding hardest about my team, and it's because I'm so unhappy with the strikers at the minute. There is the temptation to go with just one striker, so maybe going for I'm in a 4-4-2 at the minute. There's a temptation to go, maybe move to a 4-5-1 or even a 5-4-1, but I just really don't like the idea of having two 4.5 million strikers on the bench and just one striker up front, because I just feel it does leave you pretty restricted for future transfers then. So I'm trying as much as I can to avoid doing that. I know I'm probably going to finish this recording and go and have a tinker then with just one cheap striker and maybe an extra midfielder. But I really don't want to do that. I would just rather the flexibility of having two cheap strikers in a 4-4-2. So that's most likely what I'll do. So that's just a couple of things that are on my mind this week. My team won't be locked in until Friday, I would imagine. And I'll be, as I said, I'll be posting my final team on Patreon before the deadline, as I do every week for subscribers. So all I'm left to say is happy tinkering. Don't overdo it. I think one key bit of advice from me would be try not to be logged in to FPL from, in the last hour before the deadline. Try get your team locked in, at least an hour or two before the game week 1 deadline, because you don't want to be panicking last 10-15 minutes, because that's when you'll make bad decisions, when your head's not clear. So try and get it locked in, an hour or two before, earlier if possible, maybe after the press conferences on Friday. I'm actually hoping to lock my team in on Thursday night and then only change it if there's any major news on Friday, press conferences or late transfers on Thursday night or anything like that. So don't leave things till last minute. I'll be back with another episode next Tuesday and every Tuesday then. So next Tuesday I will look back on Game Week 1 and look ahead to Game Week 2. It's great to have FPL back. I'm buzzing for the football night the weekend. Looking forward to sitting down Friday night with a beer and watching Salah score 7 goals against Norwich to get off to a good start to the season. And a Liverpool clean sheet as well, hopefully. Hopefully Pookie doesn't spoil the party on Friday night. So enjoy the football at the weekend. Good luck in Game Week 1. And always remember, if Game Week 1 doesn't go well, there's still 37 weeks to put things right. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you all next week.